My name is Franklin Waverly, and the day I buried my wife was the day my son buried me alive. I'm standing in my own living room, the one I built with my bare hands 42 years ago, and my daughter-in-law is blocking the hallway like she owns the place. Her arms are crossed. Her eyes are cold. And she's smiling. "Franklin," she says, loud enough so everyone at the funeral reception can hear, "you need to collect your things. You have 10 minutes to get out." I stare at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to laugh. But the room goes silent. The guests, people who came to mourn Margaret, my wife, the woman I loved more than breathing, they're all frozen. Forks halfway to mouths. Cups suspended in mid-air. "What did you just say?" I ask. Claudine doesn't blink. "This house belongs to Evan and me now. Margaret wanted family stability. You're welcome to stay with a friend or rent somewhere, but this isn't your home anymore." I turn to my son, Evan, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I gave everything to. "Son," I whisper. He won't look at me. His face is pale, his jaw tight. Then he mutters, "Claudine's right, Dad. It's better this way." Would you believe your own child could do this to you? Drop a comment below if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. And if this is your first time here, subscribe, because this story is just getting started. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I should have screamed. I should have thrown them out. I should have called the police. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Not because I was happy. Not because I forgave them. But because I knew something they didn't. I walked out without a word, clutching Margaret's wedding ring in my palm. The same ring I slipped on her finger 50 years ago when we had nothing but love and hope. I got in my truck and drove to a motel off the highway. The kind of place where the neon sign flickers and the walls are thin enough to hear strangers arguing next door. I lay on that lumpy bed, staring at water stains on the ceiling, and I thought about everything. The decades of sweat. The sacrifices. The business I built from sawdust and stubbornness. The son I raised. The house I constructed board by board. And I thought about Margaret's last words to me, 3 months before she died. "Franklin," she'd said, her voice weak but clear, "people change when money talks. Protect what matters, not just who's loudest." I didn't understand then. But lying in that motel room, listening to trucks roar past on the interstate, I finally did. Because what Claudine didn't know, what even Evan had forgotten, was that Margaret and I had already rewritten everything. We'd seen this coming. We'd built a failsafe. A trap disguised as a will. And tomorrow morning, I was going to spring it. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since Margaret died, I felt something other than grief. I felt purpose. Cold, sharp, and patient. They buried her today. But they thought they buried me too. What they didn't know was that I'd been building my whole life. And when you're a builder, you know how to tear things down just as well as you know how to put them up. My daughter-in-law thought she could take my home in 10 minutes. But what she was about to lose, that was going to last a lifetime. I wasn't always the man with 10 acres and a business worth millions. I was a kid from a town so small it didn't even have a traffic light. My father was a laborer. My mother cleaned houses. We had 3 things in abundance: love, bills, and bruises from hard work. At 16, I got my first job at a lumberyard. The owner, Mr. Calloway, was a mean old bastard who paid minimum wage and expected maximum effort. But he taught me something nobody else could: how to see the bones of a thing before it's built. How to measure twice and cut once. How to respect wood, because wood doesn't lie. I met Margaret when I was 21. She was waitressing at a diner, the kind with checkered floors and coffee that tasted like burnt hope. I walked in covered in sawdust, ordered pie, and she smiled at me like I was somebody important. "You build things?" she asked, nodding at my hands. "Trying to," I said. "Then you're already somebody," she replied. We married 6 months later in a courthouse with 2 witnesses and a judge who rushed through the vows because he had a golf game. Margaret wore a white dress she borrowed from her sister. I wore the only suit I owned. We honeymooned in a cabin I built myself. No running water, no electricity, just us and the stars. Those early years were hard. I started Waverly Woodworks in a garage with tools I bought at pawn shops. Margaret kept the books, answered the phone, and packed sandwiches that kept us alive when clients didn't pay on time. We ate a lot of beans. We wore clothes until they had holes. But we were happy. "We're not rich in money," Margaret used to say, "but we're rich in meaning." I believed her. The business grew slowly, then all at once. First it was kitchen cabinets, then custom furniture, then commercial contracts. By the time I turned 50, we had 60 employees and a reputation that stretched across 3 states. We bought the 10-acre property, the one with the old farmhouse I renovated into something Margaret called our forever home. Evan was born when I was 30. He was a quiet kid. Smart. Thoughtful. Maybe too thoughtful. He didn't love woodworking like I did, but I didn't push him. I wanted him to find his own path. He went to college, got a business degree, met Claudine at some networking event. I didn't like her from the start. She was pretty in a sharp way, like a knife dressed up as jewelry. Her laugh was too loud. Her questions too pointed. But Margaret said I was being overprotective. "She's trying to fit in, Franklin. Give her time." So I did. But time only revealed what I'd suspected all along. I remember the first time I caught her snooping. It was maybe 5 years ago. Margaret and I were in the kitchen, and Claudine wandered into my office. I followed her, found her running her fingers over the antique desk, the handmade bookshelves, the framed photos of the business. "This is beautiful work," she said when she noticed me. "Thanks. Must be worth a lot." "It's worth what it means to me." She smiled, but her eyes didn't. They were calculating something. Adding something up. "Dad," she said, "who gets this place when you're gone? It's such a beautiful property." I should have thrown her out right then. But I didn't. I brushed it off. Told myself she was just curious. That was the first time I saw greed in her eyes. And it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. When Margaret got sick, everything shifted. Not just in our lives, but in the way people treated us. Suddenly, Evan visited more. Claudine was always there. At first, I thought it was love. I thought they cared. But love doesn't rearrange your furniture while you're at the hospital. Love doesn't tell the hospice nurse what to do in your own house. Love doesn't smile at you like you're already gone. Margaret's cancer started in her lungs and spread like wildfire. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 8. Stubborn woman fought till the end. But those 8 months drained me in ways I didn't know I could be drained. Watching someone you love fade is like watching the sun set in slow motion, knowing you can't stop it. Evan came by twice a week at first. Then once a week. Then only when Claudine dragged him. And Claudine, she was always there. Too much. Too involved. She'd walk into Margaret's room without knocking. She'd interrupt conversations. She'd suggest medications the doctors hadn't mentioned, talk about quality of life decisions, and once, God help me, she asked if we'd considered selling the business to ease the financial burden. "There's no financial burden," I told her. "Well, you never know what's coming," she said. "Best to plan ahead." Margaret heard that. I saw her jaw tighten. Later, when we were alone, she grabbed my hand. "Franklin," she whispered, her voice raspy, "don't let them take what we built." Nobody's taking anything, I said. Promise me. I promise. But she wasn't done. A week later, she insisted on seeing Harold Denton, our lawyer. I thought it was just to update paperwork. I didn't know she'd been thinking 10 steps ahead. Claudine's presence became suffocating. She started making decisions. Who could visit, when, for how long. She rearranged the living room because it flowed better. She replaced Margaret's favorite quilt with some modern throw blanket she bought online. She even had the audacity to suggest we put Margaret in a facility. It'd be better for everyone, she said. I lost it. You don't get to decide what's better for my wife. She didn't argue, just smiled. That same cold, calculated smile. Evan said nothing. He never said anything. One night, I found Claudine in my office again. This time, she wasn't admiring. She was taking pictures of the documents on my desk. The contracts, the property deeds. What are you doing? I asked. She jumped, then laughed. Oh, just sending Evan some photos. He wanted to see the old furniture again. I didn't believe her. But I was too tired to fight. Too focused on Margaret. That was my mistake. The night Margaret died, I was holding her hand. Evan was on his phone in the corner. Claudine was nowhere to be found. Probably already planning the funeral like it was a wedding. Margaret squeezed my fingers one last time and whispered, "You'll be okay." I made sure of it. I didn't understand. Not then. But I would soon. 3 months before Margaret died, she made me do something I didn't want to do. She made me plan for war. "Franklin," she said one morning over breakfast, "we need to see Harold. We just updated the will last year." Not the will. The trust. I want to add a clause. I frowned. What kind of clause? She set down her coffee, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "A failsafe. In case they turn on you." "They won't. Franklin." Her voice was firm. Claudine asked me last week how long I had left. Not how I was feeling. How long I had left. She wants me gone so she can start dividing things up. I see it. You don't want to, but I do. I wanted to argue. But deep down, I knew she was right. I'd seen the way Claudine looked at the house. The business. The bank statements she thought I didn't notice her glancing at. So we went to see Harold Denton. He was an old friend, sharp as a tack even at 75. He'd handled our legal work for decades and had seen enough family feuds to fill a library. "What are we talking about here?" Harold asked, leaning back in his leather chair. "Protection," Margaret said. "I want to make sure that if Evan or Claudine turn on Franklin after I'm gone, they lose everything." Harold raised an eyebrow. "That's bold. That's necessary." He nodded slowly. "All right. We can structure the estate as a family trust with behavioral conditions. If certain actions are taken, hostility, eviction, financial manipulation, the inheritance is automatically voided and redistributed." "Redistributed where?" I asked. Margaret smiled. "To charity. The youth programs we've always supported. Franklin's community projects. Anything but them." I stared at her. "You really think it'll come to that?" She reached across the desk, took my hand. "I hope not. But hope isn't a plan, Franklin. Love is a plan. And sometimes love means protecting the person you're leaving behind." Harold drafted the clause. It was airtight. Any act of aggression or eviction toward me would trigger immediate disinheritance. The house, the business, the accounts, all of it would transfer to the trust and be distributed to charity. "If they're good to you," Margaret said, "they get everything. If they're not, they get nothing. Simple." I signed the papers. So did she. Harold locked them in his vault. As we walked out of his office that day, Margaret stopped on the steps. The sun was setting, casting everything in gold. "One day," she said softly, "this will save you." I kissed her forehead. "I hope you're wrong." She wasn't. A month later, her condition worsened. The hospital visits became daily. The pain became unbearable. But through it all, she kept squeezing my hand, kept whispering, "Protect what matters." And on the night she died, she looked at me one last time and said, "Don't let them bury you with me." I didn't understand what she meant. Not until Claudine changed the locks and told me I had 10 minutes to get out. Then I understood everything. Margaret hadn't just left me a will. She'd left me a weapon. And now it was time to use it. The funeral was a blur. I remember the church smelling like lilies. I remember the pastor saying words that didn't land. I remember sitting in the front pew, clutching Margaret's wedding ring so hard it left a mark in my palm. Claudine wore black, but it felt like a costume. She greeted guests like a hostess at a party. She cried on cue when people were watching, then checked her phone when they weren't. Evan stood beside her like a ghost, pale and silent. I didn't care. I was numb, broken. The woman I'd spent 42 years with was in a casket 10 feet away, and all I could think about was how empty the world felt without her. After the service, people followed us back to the house for a reception. I didn't want it. I wanted to be alone. But Claudine insisted. "It's what Margaret would have wanted," she said. I didn't have the energy to fight. The house was full of people I barely recognized. Neighbors, business associates, distant relatives who hadn't called in years. They all stood around eating finger sandwiches and speaking in hushed tones. I excused myself and went to my office. I needed a moment. Just one quiet moment to breathe. That's when I saw it. The lock on the door was new. Digital. A keypad I didn't recognize. I tried the handle. Locked. My heart started pounding. I turned and walked back into the hallway, and that's when I saw the front door. Same thing. New lock. Keypad. Claudine appeared at the end of the hall. Her arms were crossed. Her expression was cold. "Franklin," she said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "you need to collect your things. You have 10 minutes to get out." The room went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward us. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "This house belongs to Evan and me now. Margaret's gone, and it's time to move forward. You're welcome to stay with a friend, but this isn't your home anymore." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I looked at Evan, standing behind her, and waited for him to say something. "Anything. Son," I whispered. He swallowed hard. Looked at the floor. Then muttered, "She's right, Dad. It's better this way." Better. That word hit me harder than any punch ever could. I looked around the room. At the guests. At the people who'd known me for decades. And all I saw were pity and shock. I could have fought. Could have called the police. Could have made a scene. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. A slow, calm smile. Because in that moment, I realized something. They thought they'd won. They thought I was defeated. They thought I'd walk out and disappear. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Margaret had already beaten them. I walked out without a word. Got in my truck. Drove to the motel. And as I lay in that bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about Margaret's voice. "Don't let them bury you with me." I wouldn't. Because tomorrow morning, I was going to make one phone call. And when I did, Claudine and Evan were going to learn a very simple lesson. You don't lock a man out of his own house and expect to keep the keys. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claudine's face. That cold smile. Those calculating eyes. The way she'd stood in my hallway, Margaret's hallway, and announced my eviction like she was reading a grocery list. The motel room smelled like cigarettes and regret. The heater rattled. The bed springs creaked every time I shifted. Through the thin walls, I could hear a couple arguing, a baby crying, life continuing like mine hadn't just shattered. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, something changed inside me. The grief didn't disappear. It never would. But it made room for something else. Something sharper, clearer, purpose. I sat up, turned on the lamp, and pulled out my phone. Margaret's voice echoed in my head, not sad, not weak, but steady. The way she'd sounded 3 months ago in Harold's office. If they turn on you, they lose everything. I stared at Harold's number in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to wait. To give Evan a chance to come to his senses. To believe that my son, the boy I'd taught to throw a baseball, the kid who'd cried when we had to put down his dog, wasn't really this person. But I'd seen his face yesterday. The way he'd looked at the floor instead of at me. The way he'd chosen her over me without even a moment's hesitation. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. I'd learned that the hard way. At 6:30 in the morning, I made the call. Franklin. Harold's voice was groggy. It's early. You all right? No, I said. I'm not. But I will be. What happened? I told him everything. The locks. The announcement. The 10 minutes. Evan's silence. The way they'd humiliated me in front of everyone who'd come to mourn my wife. Harold was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Franklin, are you sure about this? Once we activate the clause, it's irreversible. There's no going back. They locked me out of my own home, Harold. The home Margaret and I built. They did it at her funeral. Another pause. Give me 2 hours. I'll have the papers ready. Make it 1. I hung up, got dressed, and checked out of the motel. The morning was gray and cold. Fog hung low over the highway. I drove to Harold's office with the windows down, letting the air sting my face, reminding myself I was still alive. Still here. Still capable of fighting back. Harold was waiting with coffee and a manila folder. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. I've drafted the notices, he said. Once you sign this, I'll file with the court and notify Evan and Claudine immediately. Their access to all accounts will be frozen. The business shares transfer to the Margaret Waverly Foundation. The house reverts to the trust, which you control. How long before they know? They'll have the letters by noon. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Not even a little. Franklin, Harold said quietly, this is going to destroy your relationship with your son. He destroyed it yesterday, I replied. I'm just making it official. I signed the papers. Every page. Every line. And with each signature, I felt lighter. Like I was shedding weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. Margaret had been right. Love isn't just about giving. Sometimes, it's about protecting. And sometimes, protection looks like consequences. Harold gathered the documents, slid them into his briefcase. I'll handle everything from here. You should get somewhere safe. Claudine's going to be. I know what she's going to be, I said. That's why I'm going home. Franklin. It's my house, Harold. She can scream all she wants, but by the time she figures out what happened, I'll already be back where I belong. He nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure the police know you have every legal right to be there. Just in case. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Not revenge. Not hatred. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the people who'd tried to bury me were about to find out they'd dug their own graves instead. By noon, Claudine and Evan would receive the letters. By evening, they'd realize what they'd lost. And by the end of the week, they'd be gone. Margaret's voice whispered in my mind one more time. Don't let them bury you with me. I wouldn't. Because the dead can't fight back. But I wasn't dead yet. The letters arrived at 11:45. I know because I was parked down the street, sitting in my truck, watching the house. My house. I saw the courier pull up, saw him knock, saw Claudine answer the door in yoga pants and a smug expression that vanished the second she read the return address. Harold Denton, attorney at law. She ripped open the envelope right there on the porch. I couldn't hear her, but I could see her face change. Confusion. Then disbelief. Then rage. She screamed something into the house. Evan appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd just woken up. She shoved the letter at him. He read it once. Twice. His face went white. I'd seen corpses with more color. The letter was simple. Legal language stripped down to basics so even people blinded by greed could understand. Due to violations of the behavioral conditions outlined in the Margaret Waverley Family Trust, all inheritance rights of Evan Waverley and Claudine Waverley have been immediately revoked. All assets, properties, and financial accounts are hereby transferred to the trust and will be distributed according to the terms established by Margaret Waverley. Effective immediately, you have no legal claim to the property located at 1247 Oakwood Lane or any associated assets. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. I watched Claudine's mouth move. Watched her grab Evan by the shirt and shake him. Watched him stumble backward, hands up like he was trying to calm a wild animal. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A bitter, manic laugh. The kind that comes from someone who's just realized they've lost everything and can't quite process it yet. She pulled out her phone, jabbed at the screen. Probably calling Harold. Good luck with that. He'd already told me he wouldn't be taking her calls. Evan sat down on the porch steps, head in his hands. For a second, just a second, I felt sorry for him. He was my son. The boy I'd raised. The kid who used to help me in the workshop, who'd bring me water when I was sweating through my shirt on hot days. But then I remembered yesterday. The way he'd stood there and said, "It's better this way." Pity evaporated. Claudine stormed back inside, Evan trailing behind her like a kicked dog. Through the window, I could see her pacing, throwing her hands in the air, yelling. My phone buzzed. Harold. They got it, he said. I know. I'm watching. You're what? Relax. I'm down the street. Just wanted to see their faces. He sighed. Franklin, this isn't a game. No, I said. It's justice. There's a difference. Claudine called my office 17 times in the last 10 minutes. Left some very colorful voicemails. I bet. She's threatening to sue. Says the clause is invalid, that you coerced Margaret, that. Let her try, I said. Margaret was sharper than all of us combined, even when she was dying. Every document is airtight. Claudine can scream all she wants. The law doesn't care. She's also claiming you're trespassing if you return to the property. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's rich. Tell her I'll be there in an hour. With the police, if necessary. Already arranged it, Harold said. Officer Mendez will meet you there at 1. He's got copies of all the paperwork. You're a good man, Harold. I'm a man who's seen too many families destroy themselves over money. If this stops that cycle, even a little, I'll sleep better. I hung up and watched the house for a few more minutes. Claudine appeared at the window, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. Evan was on the couch, motionless. They'd thought they were so clever, changing the locks, making their move while I was vulnerable. But they'd forgotten something. I wasn't just a grieving widower. I was a man who'd built a business from nothing, who'd survived recessions and betrayals and setbacks that would have broken weaker men. And I'd been married to Margaret Waverley for 42 years. If they thought I was going to roll over and die just because they wanted my house, they'd clearly never paid attention to the woman who'd stood beside me all those years. Margaret didn't raise a quitter. And she sure as hell didn't marry one. At 12:30, I started the truck. At 12:45, I pulled into my driveway. At 12:50, Officer Mendez arrived with lights flashing. Claudine burst out the front door like a hurricane. "He can't be here," she screamed. "This is my property. He's trespassing." Officer Mendez stepped between us, calm as Sunday morning. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. Did you hear me? Ma'am." His voice was firm now. "I have documentation here that says Franklin Waverley is the legal occupant of this property. You and your husband have 72 hours to vacate." Her face went purple. "That's impossible. We own this house." "No, ma'am. You don't." He handed her a copy of the trust documents. "I suggest you contact your attorney." She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Then she turned to me. "You bastard," she hissed. "You planned this. You and that manipulative bitch." "Careful," I said quietly. "That's my wife you're talking about. Your dead wife," she spat. "Who screwed us over from beyond the grave because she was too controlling to let go." I smiled. "No. She loved me enough to protect me. That's something you wouldn't understand." Evan appeared behind her, looking like he might throw up. "Dad, please. There has to be a way to fix this. We can talk." "We can. You had your chance to talk yesterday," I said. "You chose to stand there and watch her throw me out. Now live with it." Officer Mendez cleared his throat. "Mr. Waverley has the right to enter the property. I suggest you both start packing." Claudine's hands were shaking. With rage or fear, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes," I replied. "It is." By evening, the circus was in full swing. I sat on my porch, and watched Claudine load garbage bags into her car. Not suitcases. Garbage bags. She was grabbing whatever she could, stuffing it in like a thief fleeing a crime scene. Evan moved slower. Methodically. He'd bring out a box, load it carefully, then stand there staring at nothing for a minute before going back inside. He looked broken. Hollowed out. Good. The neighbors had gathered. Mrs. Patterson from next door pretended to water plants that didn't need watering. The Johnsons across the street sat on their porch with wine glasses, not even trying to hide the fact that they were watching the show. I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see what happens when greed meets consequences. Claudine slammed the trunk of her car and marched up to where I was sitting. Her mascara was smudged. Her hair was a mess. She looked like she'd been crying, but her eyes were dry and furious. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I'm not," I replied. "My wife is dead. My son betrayed me. Happy isn't on the menu right now. You took everything from us." "No. You tried to take everything from me. There's a difference." She laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you the hero? You're just a bitter old man who can't let go." "Maybe. But I'm a bitter old man with a house and a legacy. What do you have?" She didn't answer. Just turned and walked back to the car. Evan was loading the last box. She grabbed his arm, said something I couldn't hear. He shook his head. She grabbed him harder. He pulled away. They argued right there in the driveway, voices rising. Neighbors leaned in closer. Mrs. Patterson gave up all pretense and just stood there openly staring. "This is your fault," Claudine shouted. "You were supposed to handle your father. You said he was weak. You said—" "I know what I said," Evan yelled back. "I was wrong, okay? I was wrong about all of it." "Wrong? We lost millions because you couldn't stand up to your—" "Because I listened to you." His voice cracked. "I listened to you instead of remembering who my father was, who my mother was. And now I've lost everything that matters. Oh, please. Don't pretend you suddenly grew a conscience. Get in the car, Claudine." "No. I'm not done. Get in the car." He was crying now, full-on sobbing. "Just get in and let's go. Let's just go." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she got in the car and slammed the door so hard I thought the window would break. Evan stood there, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. He looked up at me. Our eyes met across the driveway. I waited for him to say something. An apology. An explanation. Anything. But he just wiped his face, got in the car, and drove away. I watched the taillights disappear down the street, past the Johnsons, past Mrs. Patterson, past the life he could have had if he'd just been a better man. The house was quiet. Emptier than it had been in days. I walked inside, through rooms that still smelled like Claudine's perfume and Evan's cologne. I opened windows. Let the air clear. In the living room, I found things they'd left behind. A jacket. Some books. A framed photo of their wedding. I picked it up, looked at Evan's smiling face, young and hopeful. I set it face down on the table. Then I walked to Margaret's piano. The one she used to play on Sunday mornings, filling the house with music. Claudine had covered it with magazines and junk mail. I cleared it all off, sat down on the bench, and opened the fallboard. The keys were dusty. I ran my fingers across them, not playing anything, just touching. "We did it," I whispered. "Just like you said we would." The house didn't answer. But I swear I felt something. A warmth. A presence. Margaret's hand on my shoulder, the way she used to rest it there when I was worried about business or bills or life. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it comes in the form of legal documents and changed locks and grown children learning that actions have consequences. I thought about calling Evan. Thought about offering him a chance to make things right. But Margaret's voice stopped me. Protect what matters. I had. And I would keep protecting it. Because this house, this life, wasn't just mine anymore. It was hers too. And I'd be damned if I'd let anyone dishonor her memory by turning it into a monument to greed. I closed the piano and stood up. Tomorrow, I'd start cleaning. Restoring. Bringing life back to the spaces Claudine had tried to claim. Tonight, I'd just sit in the silence and remember that some battles are worth fighting. Even when you have to fight your own blood to win them. The first week back in the house was strange. Every room echoed. Every corner reminded me of Margaret. I'd walk past the kitchen and expect to see her at the stove. I'd hear a sound upstairs and think she was coming down. But the house was mine again. And slowly, I started making it feel like home. I began with Margaret's garden. It had gone wild, weeds choking her roses, the herb bed overgrown. I spent 3 days on my knees, pulling weeds, trimming, planting. My back ached. My hands blistered. But every flower I saved felt like bringing a piece of her back. Mrs. Patterson came over with lemonade one afternoon. "Franklin," she said, "I'm sorry about what happened. With Evan and that woman." "Don't be," I said. Some lessons cost more than others. Are you doing okay? Really? I looked at the roses, Margaret's favorites, pink and red, blooming despite the neglect. I'm getting there, I said. Inside, I cleaned. Top to bottom. I threw out everything Claudine had brought in, the modern furniture, the ugly throw pillows, the scented candles that smelled like chemicals. I pulled Margaret's things out of storage. Her quilts. Her photos. Her books. I restored the porch swing where we used to sit on summer evenings. I fixed the banister Evan had broken when he was 12. I rehung the family photos Claudine had taken down and replaced with abstract art. The house started breathing again. Harold called to check in. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. The foundation paperwork is finalized. The Margaret Waverley Foundation officially launches next month. They've already got 3 community programs lined up. She'd be proud. She was always proud of you, Franklin. Even when you couldn't see it. I visited the youth center that would be the foundation's first project. Kids from tough backgrounds learning carpentry, just like I had. Margaret had always wanted to do something like this. Now we were. Her name would live on. Not in a gravestone or a bank account, but in the lives of kids who needed a chance. That felt right. 3 weeks after I moved back in, my phone rang. Evan's number. I stared at it for a long time. Let it go to voicemail. Then listened to the message. Dad. His voice was thick, like he'd been crying. I know I don't deserve to talk to you. I know what I did was unforgivable. Claudine left me. Took what little we had left and disappeared. I don't even know where she went. A pause. Heavy breathing. I'm not calling to ask for money or help or forgiveness. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I'm sorry I chose her over you. I'm sorry I let her poison me against Mom. I'm sorry I stood there and watched her throw you out of your own house. Another pause. You were right about everything, and I was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't think I can even forgive myself. But I needed you to know. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. The message ended. I saved it. Didn't delete it. Didn't call back either. Because forgiveness isn't something you give just because someone asks for it. It's something you earn. And Evan had a long way to go. Maybe one day we'd talk. Maybe one day I'd be ready to hear him out. But not today. Today, I had a garden to tend. A house to restore. A foundation to build. Margaret used to say, the best revenge is a life well lived. She was right about that too. I walked back outside, picked up the shovel, and got back to work. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded me of her. Gold and pink and endless. Somewhere, I hoped she was watching. Proud of what we'd built. Proud that I hadn't let them bury me. Because I was still here. Still standing. Still building. And that was enough. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I wish I'd handled things differently. If I miss my son. The answer is complicated. Do I miss the boy Evan used to be? Every single day. The kid who'd climb into my lap with splinters in his hands from trying to help me in the workshop. The teenager who'd stay up late talking about his dreams. The young man who'd called me his hero. But that person was gone long before Claudine changed the locks. What I don't miss is the version of my son who stood silent while his wife evicted me at my own wife's funeral. The man who chose greed over loyalty. The stranger who looked at me like I was an obstacle instead of his father. That person, I don't miss at all. It's been 6 months now. The house feels like mine again, like ours, Margaret's and mine. I've restored every room, planted new flowers, even learned to play a few songs on her piano, though my fingers are clumsy and the music sounds nothing like what she used to create. The Margaret Waverley Foundation opened last month. 15 kids in the first program. They're learning woodworking, business skills, life skills. Things I wish I'd taught my own son before the world taught him the wrong lessons. One of the kids reminds me of myself at that age. Scrappy, hungry, full of potential. His name is Marcus. Last week, he built his first table. Crooked as hell, but solid. He was so proud he cried. I told him what Mr. Calloway told me 50 years ago. If you can build something with your hands, nobody can ever take that away from you. He asked if that was true. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd kept. Mostly, I said. But you have to protect it. Always protect what you build. Evan calls every few weeks now. I don't always answer. When I do, the conversations are short. Awkward. He's working as a manager at a hardware store, living in a small apartment. Claudine cleaned out their bank accounts before she left. Turns out, she'd been planning her exit for months. He says he's seeing a therapist. Working on himself. Trying to understand why he became the person he became. I told him that's good. That growth takes time. That I hope he finds what he's looking for. I haven't told him I forgive him. Because I'm not sure I do yet. Maybe someday. Maybe not. Margaret used to say, love isn't about keeping score, Franklin. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. I'm still learning that lesson. But what I do know is this. My daughter-in-law thought she could take my home in 10 minutes. She thought she could erase 42 years of love and work and sacrifice with a new lock and a cold smile. What she didn't understand, what people like her never understand, is that a home isn't just walls and furniture. It's not deeds and bank accounts. It's the life lived inside it. The memories made. The love that soaks into the foundation and holds everything together when the world tries to tear it apart. She could change the locks. She could make her demands. She could turn my own son against me. But she couldn't take what really mattered. Because that was never hers to take. I sit on the porch swing now, watching the sun set over the 10 acres Margaret and I worked so hard for. The roses are blooming. The foundation is thriving. The house is full of life again. And in 10 minutes, the same 10 minutes Claudine gave me to get out, I've thought about what I've gained. Peace. Purpose. Proof that loyalty matters more than blood. My daughter-in-law thought she could destroy me in 10 minutes. But what she lost in those 10 minutes was worth a lifetime. And what I kept was worth even more. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that dignity and loyalty matter more than greed, do me a favor. Share it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time someone underestimated you, or when you stood up for what was right even when it cost you everything. Your stories inspire others. Your voice matters. And remember, family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who stands beside you when the world tries to knock you down. Until next time, this is Franklin Waverley, reminding you that some battles are worth fighting, even when you have to fight alone. Stay strong, stay loyal, and never let anyone bury you before your time. Retry. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5